My name is Sable Hart, 35 years old. By day, I run fittings under white lights and talk in fabrics poplin, organza, the hush of silk when it finds its shape. By night, I count the quiets between breaths and try not to remember who used to decide where I sat. Horizon Couture started as a single rack in a shared studio. Now it skims runways and pays salaries, a living creature with a heartbeat I can feel through the office floor. None of that mattered when my phone lit up and the name on the screen pulled the air thin, Pamela Reed. We hadn't spoken in months, not since the last small war where she told me, with sisterly certainty, that people like me should try humility. I almost let the call die. Curiosity can be a kind of gravity, though. I swiped. Sable, she said, bright and lacquered. My birthday, Crestview Hotel, the 20th, 7 p.m. You're invited. A pause so brief and sharp I could hear the smile. Please don't embarrass us. The words did what they always do, dragged a ledger into my mind. Pamela's credits, praised report cards, lead rolls, the summer dad rented a theater for her recital. My debits, sit with the coats, help with the gift table, don't make a scene. I stood in my kitchen and watched the city dusk tilt blue. Of course, I said. Family. She let out that quick little laugh, all edge and perfume. Right, family. Then the click, the dial tone like a flat line. The room held its breath. I set the phone down and looked at the yellow post-it notes creeping around my monitor. Supply chain updates, die lot confirmations, a doodle from the intern with a nervous laugh I'd started to love hearing. Out past the window, San Diego threw gold across the water. Inside, the old feeling tried to take the wheel. The miniature version of me, 14 and invisible, hands full of other people's jackets at an autumn gala, while my mother introduced Pamela to donors as if she were a crown jewel. I poured tea, forgot it, and made coffee instead. The steam ghosted my face. The memory reel played without asking permission. Dad's retirement party where he forgot to introduce me. Forgot is generous. His eyes slid over me and found what they wanted to see. The Crestwell fundraiser where Mom pressed a safety pin into my palm and said, "Be useful," like a benediction. The times I tried to open my mouth and felt the room politely close it for me. I run a company now. I choose buttons that hold, seams that don't split, teams that don't either. To the world, that looks like success. To them, I've always been a draft they never approved. I took the phone back up and opened messages. A blank box blinked like a pulse. My thumb typed 3 words and stopped. I saved the note under a name that made me smile despite myself. Failsafe. Not a plan exactly, more like a line I would not let them push me past again. I closed it before I could argue with myself. The atelier hummed in my head even from here, the rhythm of shears, the ache in a pattern maker's shoulders, Nancy's measured voice from the last negotiation. We only sign with people who respect what we build. I had said yes to that policy because it was good business. I had not tested what it meant when disrespect wore my sister's face. I carried the mug to the living room and lowered onto the couch. The leather breathed. I thought about not going, staying home with a movie and the city's night sounds, wearing one of our sample cardigans that still smelled faintly of cedar. But avoiding has a way of turning into surrender. If I skipped, the ledger wrote itself. Sable doesn't support family. Sable is difficult. Sable makes trouble. The sentence I wanted was simpler. Sable shows up. The Crestview Hotel isn't just a venue, it's an ecosystem. Polished floors, rare orchids, deals sealed under chandeliers. Pamela didn't choose it for the view. She chose it for the mirrors. I could see the night already, the ice bucket laughter, the way Stephen would plant his hand at the small of her back to photograph a future that would look perfect in other people's feeds. I could see my chair by the gift tower, generous with shadows. I stood and went to my closet, not to choose a dress, but to take inventory of myself. I had designed a black silk column last season that moved like certainty. It wasn't armor, it was an answer. I brushed the fabric with my knuckles and pictured the ballroom lighting picking up its depth, the way a dozen phones would try to capture it and fail. The point would not be to dazzle them. The point would be to be seen without asking. My phone buzzed on the dresser. An email from procurement, a shipping delay on the eco dye from our Italian mill. I typed a quick response to reroute from our Portugal partner and CC'd Nancy, who always took storms in stride. At the bottom of the screen, another notification slid in. Pamela's group thread. Photos of centerpieces. A menu that read like a prayer to butter. I closed it. There is a generosity in not looking at what will make you smaller. When night fell, I drove to the office. The studio was empty, but the machine still carried the day's warmth. I walked the floor, trailing my fingers along a table scarred with chalk and pinpricks. In the cutting room, a roll of muslin leaned, imperfect and honest. I pictured the party again, the cup of humiliation they'd pass around with the champagne. I pictured sitting, swallowing, leaving. Then, like a flash from another lifetime, I pictured not shrinking at all. My reflection in the glass door caught me half-turned, a stranger who had learned to take up space. I smiled at her and went back to my desk. The failsafe sat in my phone like a match. I could feel heat around it even before flame. I told myself I would not use it unless they insisted I be small. I told myself I wasn't angry, just awake. On the way home, the freeway blurred into a ribbon. I drove with the windows down and let the air tug at my hair. Somewhere between exits, I decided I would go. I would stand where they put me and then stand where I chose. If they tried to write my place again, I would pick up the pen. At a red light, I opened the note for a second, read the 3 words, and closed it. My hand was steady. The city breathed. On the radio, the late-night host laughed at a joke I didn't catch, and for a moment it sounded like applause. The 20th, 7 p.m., the Crestview Hotel. I taped the details to my wall because I am a woman who keeps promises to herself first. Somewhere in the far room of my chest, a door clicked like a lock finding its line. The 20th came dressed in salt air and nerves. The ocean was a dark mirror as I pulled into the Crestview Hotel's circular drive. Valets in tailored uniforms darted between cars, their motions rehearsed and graceful. The building itself shimmered under the chandeliers, spilling through its glass façade. Every pane an invitation to perform. I stepped out, smoothing the lines of my black horizon couture gown. The silk whispered against my legs, calm and deliberate. The heels, 4 inches high, made me taller than memory. A hostess at the door looked me up and down, smiled automatically, and handed me a card embossed in silver script. Pamela Reed's birthday soiree. Ballroom level. Inside, violins were already bleeding into jazz. The air was rich with perfume and something sweet. Peach-glazed hors d'oeuvres or too much champagne. I paused near a mirror, adjusted a strand of hair, and met my own eyes. "You're not here to blend in," I murmured. The ballroom unfolded in gold. Floating candles, tables dressed in white roses, waiters weaving through laughter. Every detail screamed Pamela. Perfect, curated, self-admiring. A woman with a clipboard approached. "Name, please?" "Sable Hart," I said. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. She scanned the list, hesitated. "Your seat is just over there." She pointed to the far back corner, next to a tower of silver-wrapped gifts. A small, isolated table, 1 chair, 1 name card. For a second, the old instinct, turn, leave, disappear, tightened in my chest, but my feet stayed rooted. "Thank you," I said, and walked toward the corner. I set my clutch down, the metallic click of the clasp small but final. From here I could see the entire room, Pamela's stage in full view. She floated among guests like a hostess in a perfume ad, crimson gown cutting through the crowd. Her laughter carried easily, trained to travel. I sat, I waited, and eventually the show noticed me. Pamela's gaze snagged mine. For a beat, something flickered. Surprise, maybe, but it smoothed into that practiced smirk. She glided over, her fiancé Stephen trailing behind with a drink in each hand. "Sable," she said brightly, loud enough to draw a few heads. "You actually came." "Wouldn't miss it," I replied. Pamela's eyes swept the little table, the gift tower, the single chair. "I hope you're comfortable back here. The front tables are for sponsors and industry partners. You understand?" "I do." Stephen took a sip of champagne, grinning. "This section's perfect for creatives like you. Quiet, tucked away." His tone made creative sound like charity case. Pamela chuckled, leaning into him. "Be nice, darling. She's family." That word, family, landed like a slap in silk gloves. I could feel nearby guests pretending not to listen, their smiles stiff. Heat crawled up my neck, but I held my face steady. Pamela brushed an invisible speck from her gown and added softly, "Just behave tonight, okay? No drama. You know how you can be. I smiled. I do. She blinked, uncertain whether it was agreement or threat. Good. Enjoy the party. And she was gone, red fabric vanishing into laughter. My hands were shaking when I reached for a glass of water. Dad and Mom arrived minutes later, his suit impeccable, her pearls sharp under the lights. I stood, instinctively searching for warmth. Mom, Dad. Mom's eyes flicked over me, then toward Pamela across the room. Sable, please, she said softly. Don't ruin your sister's night. Dad's mouth barely moved. Keep to yourself, he muttered, already turning toward a cluster of colleagues. The space they left behind was colder than the air conditioning. I sat again. For years, I'd thought silence was strength, that swallowing insults built character. But in that moment, it felt like acid, slow and quiet. I looked at my reflection in the water glass, then at my phone lying face up beside the untouched bread plate. The note was still there, failsafe. I opened it. 3 words blinked at me like a dare. Cancel the deal. I exhaled slowly, fingers hovering. Brooks Retail Group, Stevens Empire, the company waiting on a multi-million-dollar contract with Horizon Couture to rebrand their luxury division. Pamela's fiancé, the man who had just smirked at me across his champagne flute, stood to gain the most. It was supposed to be signed tomorrow morning. Nancy would already be awake, somewhere across town, reviewing last-minute revisions. She'd follow any instruction I sent without question. Pamela's laughter reached me again, brittle and confident. I watched her tilt her head against Stephen's shoulder as cameras flashed. Then I typed, steady and deliberate, cancel the $5.5 million deal with Brooks Retail Group. Effective immediately, no discussion. My thumb hovered over send. A beat of hesitation. This is personal, a voice whispered. Don't mix business with pain. Another voice answered, low and clear. Pain is what built the business. I pressed send. A tremor went through me. Not guilt, not satisfaction. Something quieter. Relief, maybe, like a lock finally catching. I placed the phone face down. At the front of the room, Pamela raised her glass for a toast, her smile bright enough to hurt. I caught her eye for a fraction of a second. She didn't know yet. None of them did. The orchestra swelled. A waiter brushed past me, carrying a tray of golden hors d'oeuvres. I could hear the guests laughing at some joke Stephen made about new money and fashion girls. My pulse steadied. They had built this room to remind me of my place. I had just rewritten the floor plan. I rose from my chair, heels crisp against the marble, and started walking toward the center of the ballroom. The crowd parted slightly, curiosity rippling like silk in water. Pamela turned as I approached, her smile faltering just enough for me to see the unease underneath. Sable, she said, what are you— We need to talk, I said evenly, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. The violins faltered. A few conversations stopped mid-sentence. Pamela's voice dropped to a whisper that still carried. Not now. Don't make a scene. Too late, I said softly. The air thickened with interest. Dozens of eyes shifted toward us, hungry for spectacle. Pamela folded her arms. Sable, please, you're embarrassing yourself. I smiled without warmth. No, Pamela. For once, I think I'm finally introducing myself. And then, before she could speak again, I turned toward the room. My name is Sable Hart, I said, my voice steady and clear, and I'd like to thank my family for reminding me exactly where I stand. The whispers began, just a spark, but soon it would spread. Pamela froze, her perfect evening trembling at the edges. I wasn't done. Not yet. The ballroom fell into a hush that didn't belong in a celebration. Glasses stopped midair. The quartet's violinist missed a note and pretended not to. Pamela's face stayed fixed in that brittle smile, the kind you paint on when you realize the mirror has cracked. Sable, she said through her teeth, sit down before you embarrass. I raised a hand, cutting her off with a calmness that didn't feel like me. No, Pamela. For once, you'll listen. My voice carried farther than I expected. I grew up in this family learning that silence was grace, that being invisible was polite. Tonight, I just want to say thank you for teaching me exactly what not to become. A ripple went through the crowd, uneasy, curious, the sound of people deciding whether to stay for the show or pretend not to see it. Pamela's fiancé, Stephen, set his drink down. Look, he said, loud enough for the front tables. I get that she's emotional. Artists can be volatile. He laughed, coaxing a few weak echoes. I turned to him. Volatile? I repeated softly. Funny choice of word, coming from a man whose company just lost a $5.5 million contract. He blinked. What? You heard me. I picked up my phone from the table. The screen glowed, message sent. Brooks Retail Group, effective immediately, deal canceled. The room inhaled as one organism. A man near the bar whispered something. Another pulled out his phone. Stephen's face drained. You can't. I can, I said, and I did. Pamela's hand shot out, gripping my arm, nails pressing crescents into my skin. Sable, stop. You don't know what you're doing. I looked down at her hand until she let go. I know exactly what I'm doing. Dad's voice boomed from across the room. Enough. This is Pamela's night. You're making a spectacle of yourself. He was red in the face, but not from shame, from inconvenience. Mom hovered at his elbow, whispering frantic damage control. You mean I'm making a spectacle of the truth? I asked. You raised us to believe appearance was everything. Well, tonight everyone gets to see the full picture. A collective murmur swelled. Someone clapped once, then stopped, unsure whose side they were on. Stephen pulled out his phone, thumb trembling. This is ridiculous, he muttered, stepping away to make a call. Nancy, it's Stephen. Tell me the deal's still on. He waited. His expression shifted from denial to disbelief, then horror. You canceled it, he whispered. You actually canceled it. Pamela's eyes darted between us. We can fix this, just please. I shook my head. You can't fix respect. You either give it or you don't. And then, through the stunned silence, another voice joined, smooth, measured, carrying quiet authority. Ms. Hart? I turned. Edward Pierce, in a navy suit, moved through the crowd like someone who never hurried but was always on time. I remembered meeting him at a sustainable fashion summit the year before, his handshake warm, his interest genuine. Good to see you again, he said, stopping beside me. I hadn't realized you were related to Pamela. I should have guessed. Same eyes, though only one pair seems to see clearly. A few polite laughs broke the tension. Edward smiled faintly, then addressed the crowd. Horizon Couture has changed how our industry looks at ethical production. Ms. Hart's work is setting international standards. The words hit like a spotlight turned the right way for once. Pamela's mouth opened, but nothing came out. Stephen just stared at his phone. Edward continued, tone almost conversational. I imagine Brooks Retail's investors will want clarification about that canceled contract, though honestly, their reputation could use reevaluation. He looked at me again. If you're open to new partnerships, Ms. Hart, I have colleagues who would love to meet with you. Thank you, I said quietly. Applause began, not thunderous, but enough to echo. A sound of approval, or maybe relief. People love to stand with whoever looks like they're winning. Pamela turned to Mom and Dad, whispering furiously, but their posture told the story. Years of authority slipping through their fingers. Dad tried one last time. This is family business. Let's not make it worse. I met his gaze. Family business is what got us here. He flinched. Edward gestured toward the exit. Shall we get some air? I nodded and followed him out into the corridor. The heavy doors closed behind us, sealing in the whispers. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Edward said, That was brave. No, I said, it was overdue. He smiled, offered a card. Call me next week. We can talk about possibilities. When he left, I stood alone in the hallway, the muffled music resuming behind the doors as though nothing had happened. I should have felt victorious. Instead, there was only quiet, the kind that comes after a storm when you're not sure what's still standing. I looked down at my phone, at the sent message. Nancy had already replied with a simple confirmation. Done. Contract terminated. The finality of it settled like dust. Back inside, laughter had started again. Forced. Brittle. Pamela's world hadn't collapsed yet, but I could hear the first cracks forming in the rhythm of the music. I walked through the lobby, the marble floor gleaming under soft light. At the doors, a valet handed me my coat. Leaving early, ma'am? He asked. Just on time, I said. Outside, the city smelled of ocean and car exhaust. I exhaled, the air sharp in my lungs, and for the first time in years, my reflection in the glass doors looked like someone who didn't need an invitation to belong. But somewhere beneath the satisfaction, a question stirred. Had I drawn a boundary or started a war? I didn't have the answer yet. I only knew that the next time they said my name, they would say it carefully. 3 days later, San Diego wore that washed-out sunlight that makes even regret look clean. The cafe was quiet, all brass lamps and cinnamon in the air. I arrived 10 minutes early, chose a corner table by the window, and waited. The barista called out orders softly, cups clinking like punctuation. When the bell finally chimed, Pamela stepped in. Her reflection hit the glass before she did. Same perfect posture, same practiced grace, but something was off. The confidence she wore, like perfume, had thinned. She spotted me instantly. For a second, I thought she might turn around. Instead, she adjusted her purse strap and walked over, heels muffled on the tile. "Sable," she said, her voice soft, almost brittle. "Thank you for coming." I nodded toward the seat across from me. "Sit." She did, exhaling a breath that trembled on the way out. I didn't expect things to spiral like that. "The party?" I asked. Her eyes darted to the table. "The deal, the rumors, you saying what you said." I stirred my coffee slowly. Truth has that effect. Spirals, mostly. She flinched, but tried to keep her tone calm. "You embarrassed me in front of everyone we know. Do you have any idea what that did?" "Yes," I said simply, "for once." Her mouth opened, then closed again. A pause. Then, "I was wrong to treat you like that, okay? I didn't think you'd actually come. I thought you'd—" "Disappear?" I supplied. "You've always counted on that." Pamela's fingers twisted her napkin into threads. "You didn't have to go for Stephen's company. That was personal." I looked up. "So was every public insult you've thrown since we were 12. She swallowed. "This isn't the same." "It's exactly the same," I said, voice even. "You built your power on humiliation. I finally taught you the cost." Her lower lip quivered. "You ruined my engagement, Sable." The investors pulled out. "Stephen's board is furious. He blames me." "Does he?" I asked. "Or does he blame the man who laughed while his fiancée degraded a business partner in public?" Her eyes filled, but didn't spill. "I didn't mean for any of that to happen." "Of course you didn't," I said. "You never mean it. You just do it." She pressed a hand to her forehead, voice cracking. "I lost everything. For a heartbeat, pity almost surfaced, but it was tangled with too much memory." "You lost the illusion," I said. "Everything else is still standing. Try building something real for once." Pamela looked at me then, really looked, the way someone studies a person they thought they'd already mapped. "You've changed," she said quietly. "No," I replied. I stopped apologizing. Silence settled between us. Outside, a mother pushed a stroller past the window. The world kept moving. Pamela leaned forward. "Can't we start over? You and me. Dad and Mom are humiliated enough. The least we can do is show unity." There it was, the real motive peeking through the cracks. "Unity," I repeated, tasting the word like something sour. "For their reputation, you mean?" "You," her face tightened. "They're still your parents. They were supposed to act like it." She recoiled, color draining from her cheeks. I sighed, feeling the fatigue of years settle in my bones. "Pamela, I don't hate you. I just finally understand you. You don't want a sister. You want an audience. I'm not auditioning anymore." Her voice broke. "So that's it?" "That's it." I stood, sliding my chair back slowly. The scrape of metal on tile sounded final. "You should get the check," I said softly. "You still care about appearances." "Care about—" "Sable, wait." I paused halfway to the door. Her eyes shone wet now, mascara holding on by habit. "I really am sorry," she said. "I didn't know you'd built all that. Horizon, the deals, the people who respect you. I didn't know." "That's the point," I said. "You never looked." I left before she could answer. The bell above the door rang again, clean and indifferent. Outside, the sun hit hard. I walked without destination until I reached the edge of the waterfront. Boats bobbed against the pier, white against blue, the horizon sharp as thread. I leaned on the railing and let the wind move my hair across my face. For years, I'd waited for an apology, thinking it might close something inside me. But closure isn't a door. It's the moment you realize you can walk away without locking it. That night, I opened my laptop at home. Nancy had sent over final numbers from our new European partnership, triple the profit margin of the canceled deal. I smiled, typing back, "Approved. Move forward." Her reply came within minutes. "On it. And Sable, you did the right thing." I stared at the screen until the words blurred. Maybe she was right. Maybe right and wrong were just different sides of self-respect. The city outside my window hummed, alive and indifferent. Somewhere out there, Pamela was probably explaining, justifying, rewriting. Let her. I was finished being edited by other people's comfort. For the first time in decades, the quiet didn't feel like exile. It felt like space. I poured myself a glass of water, watched the condensation trail down the glass, and whispered into the empty room. Finally! Months later, I stood by the panoramic window of Horizon Couture's headquarters. The city skyline stretched beneath a soft coastal haze. Morning light caught on the edge of the glass and painted gold across my desk. Contracts, swatches, sketches, evidence of a world I had built stitch by stitch. Nancy knocked softly before stepping in, a folder in hand. "The press release is ready," she said. "Partnership with Maison Leclerc goes live at noon. They're calling it one of the most significant sustainability alliances of the year." I smiled. "Good, send it." She hesitated, her voice lowering. "You might want to know, Brooks Retail filed for restructuring last week. Steven's out as CEO." I didn't flinch. I'm not surprised. "Pamela?" I exhaled slowly, watching the morning traffic blur below. I haven't heard from her since the cafe. Nancy studied me, curious but respectful. "You don't regret it, do you?" I turned back to the window. "No," I said. "Regret is a luxury for people who haven't paid full price yet." She nodded, leaving me with the quiet hum of the office. The city beyond looked different now. Less like something to prove, more like something that simply existed because I'd decided it could. The fallout had reached farther than I expected. Within weeks of the Crestview incident, the family's social circle, those elegant satellites who had always orbited Pamela, had shifted their loyalty elsewhere. Invitations dried up. My parents' country club memberships weren't renewed. Pamela's engagement unraveled under the weight of scandal and debt. The tabloids had framed it as sister versus sister, the Couture clash. But they didn't understand. It was never about revenge. It was about correction. Still, sometimes I caught myself wondering how Pamela was living now, whether she still looked at her reflection the way she used to, mistaking admiration for love. A notification pinged on my phone, a message request from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read, "You canceled the wrong thing." My pulse skipped. The body of the email was short. "Not all debts disappear when you stop answering the phone." No signature. For a long moment, I just stared. It could have been Stephen, bitter and broke, or one of his investors, or maybe Pamela, unable to let the silence stand. Whoever it was, the words didn't carry fear anymore. They carried confirmation. I'd broken something that had quietly owned me for decades. I closed the email, flagged it for Nancy's legal team, and went back to my work. That afternoon, Edward Pierce visited the office. He was as composed as ever, his silver cufflinks catching light. "Sable," he said warmly, "your collection in preview is already oversubscribed. The investors from New York want an early showing." "Then let's give them one," I said. He smiled. "I'm glad we reconnected that night. Most people would have crumbled under that kind of public pressure." "I've been training for it since childhood," I replied. Edward laughed softly. "You're formidable, but, if I may, don't let your strength harden into isolation. Sometimes power is knowing when not to fight." His words lingered long after he left. That evening, as the office emptied, I took the elevator down alone. The lobby's marble floor reflected the soft glow of pendant lights. I could still hear the faint echoes of that night at Crestview. The applause, the gasps, the moment everything shifted. Outside, the air smelled of salt and city. I walked toward the bay, past restaurants filled with voices that no longer made me feel small. My phone buzzed again, this time a voicemail from an unknown number. I pressed play. Pamela's voice, thin but steady. "Sable, it's me. I'm not asking for anything. I just wanted to say you were right about everything. I'm starting over. I hope you're happy." A long pause, then a click. I stood there, phone still in my hand, waves breaking against the pier. For once, I didn't feel triumph or pity, just release. I deleted the voicemail without saving it. Some ghosts deserve silence more than answers. When I got home, I poured a glass of wine and pulled up the final draft of Horizon's new internal policy, the one I'd written after the fallout. Effective immediately, any partner or client who undermines or disrespects the Horizon team, publicly or privately, will be permanently removed from all collaborations. No exceptions. At the bottom, I signed it, Sable Hart, CEO. The date gleamed beside my name. I printed a copy, folded it neatly, and slid it into the same drawer where the fail-safe note had once lived. The match had burned out. In its place sat a law. Tomorrow, the press would call Horizon Couture a story of redemption. They'd use words like grit and empowerment, never knowing the quiet truths behind them, the ache, the bloodline, the woman who finally stopped asking to be seen. I turned off the lights. The city's reflection blinked against the glass, steady and waiting. Outside, a foghorn sounded in the distance, low, certain, final. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to answer it.